Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, friends, enemies, and comrades, I hope you're doing well, whatever you are. This is Fabrizio Romano, aka Mr. Kenya Revolutionary. Now, there's a video from Spice FM. There was an interview with a gentleman called Wahuru Ndoro. I guess this guy used to work for the Treasury in Kenya. And I think that episode is very interesting. And I need, if you watch this video, please go back and go to Spice FM, their channel, YouTube channel, and type in Wahuru Ndoro. And he speaks about debt, how Kenyans acquire debt, and he explains how much we owe. And he breaks down the commercial debts, the trilateral, bilateral debts, and how we pay for them, and how the possibility of how people can siphon this money and do whatever the case is. Just a quick breaking news before I go on with my submission here. I think the High Court today just ruled a case in favor of there was a case about the SGR, if the SGR loans were actually legal. And the courts basically announced that they were legal. They were legally attained, this loan. Because remember, and it's so funny because just a few weeks earlier, Mr. Omkiom Tata was talking about odious debt, and he was talking about these loans that has been taken during Uhuru's tenure, which some of them might have been illegal. And it's so funny that after that made news, it was like kind of national news. Now we have the courts come up and rule that those loans were attained legally. Because there was a talk that we, the people, do not have to pay back these loans, given the nature of how these loans were taken. Because some of it, like Okiom Tete said, they never actually reached Kenyan bank. They just went straight to China. But back to Wahuru Ndoro, there's something that's very, 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 very interesting that he said. And this is why I kind of maintain that Kenya is not truly independent. We are still at the mercy, being enslaved financially by Western governments. Now, he explained this thing. How do we get these loans? He basically said that, and I'll break it down, I'll give you the clips. So I want to make my presentation very short so I can put this clip and you can see what he's saying. You can hear it from the horse's mouth rather than me trying to explain it. But he said this: most of these loans coming from the West, IMF to be exact, or World Bank, these people actually, the loan originates from the Federal Reserve in the US, Federal Reserve, okay? And basically they approve the loan and put it in an account, maybe Chase Bank somewhere. And then the Kenyan government transfer the money from Chase Bank or whatever the case is, the bank somewhere in Manhattan, and they bring that money back here, which will be considered a consolidated fund. It's under the Treasury, it's under the supervision of the Treasury. And from there, it's when it's disbursed according to the budget that the president or whoever approves, okay? So, my main point of this video is this. Number one, and I know most Kenyans don't know this, okay? He also mentioned something very, very interesting. He said that the CBK, according to PFM, Public Finance Management Act, which basically spells out how monies is supposed to be handled, okay? He says that the CBK, Central Bank of Kenya, who is going to be governed by Mr. Thuge, I forgot his name, Kamal Thuge, I guess. But anyway, CBK is supposed to be independent entity, okay? Now, coming to my main point, did you know that the loans that you're getting from the Federal Reserve in the US, first of all, Federal Reserve is a private bank. This is not an American bank. And even most Americans don't know that, okay? It's a private bank. So the US cannot audit it because it's a private bank. It's not an American bank. That's what number one. And similarly, CBK, Central Bank of Kenya, according to the law, is supposed to be independent. Independent of what? The Kenyan government cannot audit CBK. Did you know that? So essentially, it's a private bank too. What am I trying to say? What am I trying to say? If you know, you know. Please pay attention. I'll try to keep this video short. It's already 5 minutes. I'm trying to make it short. What I'm trying to say is this. Kenya's debt is in the hands of private hands, not governments. I told you about the book that I'm actually reading right now, which is Economic Confessions of an Economic Hitman. Okay? Written by John Perkins. This is the guy who used to be an ex-CIA guy who worked for World Bank, and he negotiated loans with nations, different nations. And he explains how World Bank, IMF, collude or work in tandem with these multi-corporations, which are Western, multi-transnational corporations, to lend countries, nations, loans that they know they cannot pay back. Okay? And also, if they don't want the loan, actually, they usually try to get them to, they try to send the jackals, as he calls it, to take over the country through coup d'etat or assassinations. Okay? But anyway, just to make this video short again, I'm trying to repeat myself. I'm just trying to say this. Kenya's debt is under private hands. We are being ruled by the private entities. Okay? This IMF and World Bank is a sham. And they're designed to give loans to countries like Kenya so they can control the majority, some certain aspects of your economy. Okay? But anyway, I'll let Ndoro to explain this. I was shocked beyond belief when I heard that our money, some of the loans, we get it from the Federal Reserve in America. It's shocking. Kenya is still enslaved. And that's why I say I have no hope for Mr. William Ruto to get us out, to truly help us out of this financial borehole. Anyway, watch the video. Tell me what you think. This is really, really shocking to me. I don't know about you, but if you know anything about the Federal Reserve, you know this is not good, and how they're tied in with the IMF, and how IMF... You know, a quick example before I leave, please. I mentioned in my previous video, the reason why Zambia and Zimbabwe is like, let's say, their ports, the airports are being run by Chinese is because they can't pay their debt. And so the Chinese come to you and tell you, if you can't pay your debt, then we shall take over your ports and operate in it in the next 9 years or 100 years. That's the new colonial system. It has always been about controlling economies. But anyway, watch the video, tell me what you think. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel, please go ahead and subscribe. Tell me what you think, comments. All right, and I'll talk to you guys later. Watch the video by Muhoro. This is the interview, okay? Peace.
Multilateral loans and bilateral, those ones, it's a bit. But the commercial loan, there's a possibility. Is there a possibility? Gone, said you've borrowed the money, received money from lenders, money is supposed to come and enter into the system for development projects, and then money disappears before hitting said development.
Technically speaking, if it's going to be any mischief, it will happen once it's in our system. But as I said, because it's a commercial
By
loan,
being in our system, what does that mean?
it means, I'll give you an example. Every country on earth has, and that's changing, of course, every country on earth tends to have an account with the Federal Reserve, especially New York. I know the Federal Reserve is seven basically regional reserves that form the Federal Reserve. And so, as a general rule...
Why does every country in the world have an account with them?
That's a conversation, a whole conversation for another day. Suffice it to say, when they then raise... part of the reason is also a confidence issue, and that's a structure of international finance.
Okay.
So when you launch your Eurobond, and the investors say, yes, we are going to buy a bond, then they ask, where do we deposit the money? Now, they could deposit the money into Kenya's bank account with Chase Manhattan. But, you know, it's a sovereign country, right? So as a general practice, then they say they can deposit these funds with the Federal Reserve or for your credit.
Okay.
Now, the moment it enters the Federal Reserve account for Kenya, Kenya then chooses what to do with it. It can then, actually by law, it's supposed to then transfer it immediately to the consolidated fund.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a clear chain of custody.
Mm-hmm.
So
That is, in theory, what's supposed to happen.
No. That's how it happens. You don't have a choice because remember your lenders in the first instance want to see. They don't think you've gone and put it.
There's
given
some
you $4 billion,
accountability there.
$2 billion, and you've gone and put it into a Karomaindo account somewhere. that chain must be clear. So once it gets in there, then you have signed the document. You now owe that money. Now, the moment you do that, then the prerogative of the National Treasury is to move those funds, in whole or in part, into the consolidated fund. And even that transfer is also mandated by law. So you cannot move it from that Federal Reserve account to Mr. Wahoro's personal US account. Or, it has to come, that chain of custody must come here. But of course, as famous politicians once said, money is fungible. The moment it enters the pot, then it just becomes part of the general
Money
budget
is
support.
money.
Can I ask, who is responsible for oversight? That when this money comes in, there must be somebody. There must be an office, there must be a department who says, okay, this is this money coming in, because if we can dumb it down, if we can simplify it so we can understand exactly what's happening here. When money comes in, who's responsible to say, okay, this is Eurobond. This is what it's supposed to be. This is what it is meant for. Is it following the chain that it is meant to? And if it doesn't, apart from the Auditor General is one, after all has been said and done, jumps up and says, hold on a minute, this was supposed to be for this, it didn't happen. But who looks at this thing, essentially, and says, hold on, guys, you said this money was supposed to be for this, it is not going there.
That's always the responsibility of the economic manager of the country, which is the National Treasury.
Okay.
And within the National Treasury, the specialist department that looks to the detail of how that is done is the PDMO. So the question then really, and sometimes I feel like it sort of gets distracted. That chain of custody is easy to prove. But the question then becomes that once it arrives into the consolidated fund, it becomes general budget support. So what I need to make clear is that once it enters that pot called the consolidated fund, the division between what it was purposed for and what happens happens. The next time you see how it's then split up is in fact in terms of where the monies are allocated, and you trace where the monies are allocated.
So you're saying until it has been spent, it sits there. But until it has been spent is when you can now come back and say, okay, divvied up, it went here, it was supposed to go here. So before that,
But
what we're saying is that anybody can do anything inside here, and we will not be able to ask questions until after the fact.
For it to be withdrawn from that fund, there's a
Somebody
control
says,
of budget.
okay, yeah.
Which is part of it. And I think you're reinforcing my point. Part of the reason our constitution was crafted the way it was to create a very distinct points in that chain of custody. From the moment the money is raised in the US, it arrives here, and any money leaving the consolidated fund, that's where you have the PFM. Now, the trick here is to be able to do your analysis to ask the question, okay, where is the money coming? I'm not talking necessarily the budget. How is the money being dispersed from the consolidated fund? So there's a little trick, but a really interesting question I'd put to analysts. And that is, forget the budget. If you went and looked at how actual outgoings, how actual money leaves and spent, you could have a very interesting analysis. For example, at the end of every year, the government budgeting is cash.
Yes.
It's cash based. It's not accrual, which basically means you spend what you collect. So you can't spend more than what you've collected, right? So if at the end of every year you said how much came in, how much left out, technically speaking, you can't really have a deficit.
You
know
should
what I mean?
balance.
It should balance.
Yes.
Now, what then? When you then compare that year on year, going back 10 years, and then trace that against our budgets, which is your spending plan, that could be a very interesting conversation, because you will see there's a bit of a difference, and that's
That we
because when the
spent
government
more
is
than-
spending with third parties,
Yeah.
the commitments are multi-year, so there's an element of accrual in there. But that's only in the budgeting. In the spending, you can then go year by year and say how much has been spent on every specific item on the budget, and ignoring the actual budget, you compare then the actuals against the budget. That difference there could tell, I think, can create a lot of confusion, which is part of the reason why when you see like our budget right now, it's a 3.4? Is it 3?
The current year.
Yeah.
The one-
Is it
The one that
3.2?
we are finishing.
Yeah,
with.
the trillion, yeah.
Yeah, right now is a 3.2.
3.2. There was 3.2 against 2.4. So it's almost like a trillion difference there.
Yeah.
That also accommodates past commitments that are going to fall due, even as you're adding to those our present commitments. But technically, at the end of the financial year,
They should
you can
balance.
only spend what you've collected. And that's where now the likes of even bilateral lending, for example, a lot of bilateral lending is disbursed as the project needs it. So it's not like it's given lump sum, and then you have to hold it